Gunfire shattered the midnight silence. Ethan Cole hit the cabin floor as bullets tore through the window above his bed. Glass exploded inward, raining down in glittering shards that caught the moonlight like falling stars. He rolled his body, moving on instinct, honed from years of riding hard trails in sleeping light. His hand found the Winchester rifle under the bed, fingers wrapping around wood worn smooth by use and time. Outside, the thunder of hooves, the sharp crack of men's voices, the orange flicker of torches painting the darkness in violent strokes of light and shadow. A voice boomed through the night, rough and angry, like gravel scraping metal. "Cole, we know you found it. Give us the map or we burn you out." Ethan's mind raced, even as his body stayed low, pressed against the rough wooden floor. What map? What were they talking about? He owned nothing worth killing for. His ranch was dying. His cattle were scattered. His debts were crushing him day by day. The back door exploded inward with a crash of splintering wood. Two men rushed through the opening, revolvers drawn and gleaming in the moonlight. Their faces were hidden beneath bandanas, but their intentions were written clear in the way they moved, predators hunting cornered prey. Ethan fired once. The Winchester's roar filled the small cabin, deafening in the confined space. The first man dropped like a puppet with cut strings, his gun clattering across the floor. The second dove behind the table, wood chipping as Ethan's second shot went wide. Then movement from the loft. A shadow detached itself from darkness, dropping down silent as smoke, landing behind the second intruder with the grace of a hunting cat. A flash of steel caught the light. The blade moved, quick and sure. The man crumpled without making a sound, his life leaving him before he understood it was gone. Ethan spun rifle, aimed at the new threat, his finger tight on the trigger. A woman stood there in the dim light. Apache, young, maybe 25 or so. She wore trail clothes stained with dust and sweat. Her long black hair tied back in a practical braid. Blood dripped from the knife in her hand, dark and terrible in the silver moonlight. Her eyes met his across the small space, dark and unreadable as deep water. For half a heartbeat they stared at each other, stranger and stranger, killer and killer. Then more gunfire erupted from outside, shattering the moment. She hissed through her teeth, her voice low and urgent. "How many?" Ethan's mind snapped back to the present danger, to the men circling his home like wolves around wounded elk. "I don't know. 6, 8. Her eyes flicked to the back window, calculating, measuring distances and angles with the practiced eye of someone who'd survived by always knowing the way out. "Back window. Go, now." Ethan hesitated, 1,000 questions forming on his tongue. Who was she? Why was she here? Why had she just saved his life? "Who the hell are you? Move!" The single word cracked like a whip. Ethan moved. They went through the back window together, dropping into the cool night air of the New Mexico desert. The ground was hard under his boots, the sky above scattered with stars that seemed too peaceful for what was happening below them. Behind them, the cabin erupted in fresh gunfire as the attackers realized their prey had fled. The woman grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the darkness beyond the barn. Her grip was iron-strong despite her slender build. "The horses! Where?" Ethan pointed toward the corral. They ran, keeping low, using shadows and moonlight to hide their movement. Behind them, men shouted. Torches swept the darkness, searching. At the corral, Ethan's mare whinnied softly, sensing danger in the air. Beside her stood another horse, one Ethan didn't recognize. A paint mare, Apache, bred by the look of her. They saddled, fast fingers, working leather and buckles with practiced speed. Ethan's mind was racing now, trying to understand, trying to piece together what was happening. Who were these men? Why did they think he had a map? And who was this woman who fought like a warrior and moved through his home like she'd been watching it for days? A bullet whined past his ear, close enough that he felt the heat of its passage. "Ride!" the woman shouted. They kicked their horses into a gallop, thundering away from the burning torches and the angry voices. The desert opened up before them, vast and dark and endless. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew fainter, but didn't stop. These men, whoever they were, weren't giving up. They rode hard for an hour, pushing the horses to their limits, putting distance between themselves and danger. The woman led the way, guiding them through arroyos and around rock formations with the confidence of someone who knew this land like the lines of her own hand. Finally, she pulled up in a small canyon hidden from view by towering walls of sandstone. A thin trickle of water ran down one wall, pooling in a shallow basin. The horses drank gratefully while Ethan and the woman stood apart, watching each other in the starlight. Now, with distance and relative safety, Ethan could really look at her. She was younger than he'd first thought, her face unlined, but carrying the kind of hardness that came from seeing too much, too young. Apache definitely by her features and the way she carried herself, beautiful in a fierce way, like a knife blade catching light. "Who are you?" Ethan asked again, his voice rough from exertion and adrenaline. "Ayanna." Just the name, nothing more. "Why were you in my cabin?" "I was watching you. Have been for 3 days." The admission was calm matter of fact. No shame, no apology. "Why?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she moved to her horse, checking the saddle, adjusting straps that didn't need adjusting. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, colder. "Those men, the ones who attacked tonight. Do you know what they wanted? They mentioned a map. I don't have any map." "No, but they think you do." She turned to face him fully. "Someone told them you found something on your land. Something valuable." "I haven't found anything except debt and dying cattle." Ayanna studied him for a long moment, as if weighing whether to believe him. 3 days ago, a man in expensive clothes came to your ranch. You talked on your porch. He left angry." Ethan remembered. Vincent Harlow, the land buyer, the man who'd offered $400 for a ranch that owed $650. "You saw that?" "I see everything." She moved closer, and in the starlight, her eyes held something dangerous, something barely controlled. "That man Harlow, he works for people who want your land, not because of the cattle, not because of the water, because of what's underneath it. There's nothing underneath it. You're wrong." The certainty in her voice made him pause. "How do you know?" "Because my people have known about it for 200 years. She knelt, drawing patterns in the dust with her finger. "Gold. Not much. Not enough for the big mining companies, but enough for one man to clear his debts and start over." Ethan felt his heart rate pick up. Gold. On his land. It seemed impossible, too convenient, too much like the kind of luck that always came with a price tag attached. "Why tell me this?" "Because I need something from you. Protection. Help. A place to hide until I can leave the territory." She stood, brushing dust from her hands. "I tell you where the gold is. You dig it up, pay your debts. In return, you let me stay. Keep me safe from the men hunting me." "What men?" "Does it matter? Apache. White. They all want something from me I won't give." Her jaw set hard. "Will you help me or not?" Ethan wanted to say no, wanted to tell this strange woman to ride away and take her secrets with her, but the arithmetic of his life was brutal and simple. $650 owed, 12 days to pay it, 12 cattle that might bring 200 if he was lucky. "Where is it?" "This gold on your northern boundary, near the foothills, about 6 feet down. And I'm supposed to just start digging holes based on the word of a stranger who's been spying on me. You're supposed to recognize when fate offers you a lifeline." She moved to her horse, preparing to mount. "But if you'd rather lose everything and die homeless, that's your choice." "Wait." She paused, one foot in the stirrup. "Those men tonight. They'll come back, and they'll have more questions than I have answers. Then we'd better move fast." She swung into the saddle with fluid grace. "I'll show you where to dig, tomorrow, at first light. But tonight we need to disappear. They're still looking." 3 days earlier, life had been simpler, no less desperate, but simpler. Ethan had stood in his barn at dawn, counting what remained of his herd, 12 cattle, down from 40 the previous spring. The drought had been merciless, turning grass to dust and streams to cracked mud. The bank had been more merciless still. He'd pulled the crumpled notice from his pocket for the 10th time that morning, reading words he already had memorized. Final notice. Amount due $650. Due date September 15, 1879. Failure to remit will result in immediate foreclosure and auction of property. 12 days. He'd counted them on his fingers like a man counting bullets before a gunfight. 12 days to find money that didn't exist. To save land that was killing him slowly day by exhausting day. He'd walked to the small cemetery plot behind the barn. One grave. One wooden cross weathered by 3 years of sun and wind and rain. Nayeli Cole, beloved wife, 1854 to 1876. 3 years gone, but the pain was still fresh some days. Still sharp enough to catch his breath when he wasn't expecting it. People in town thought she'd died of fever. That's what Ethan told them. It was easier than the truth, cleaner, less complicated. The truth was darker, messier, stained with guilt that wouldn't wash away no matter how many sunrises he watched or how hard he worked. Ethan wasn't a war veteran, wasn't a cavalry scout. His past was different, built on choices that had seemed necessary at the time, but looked uglier in hindsight. He'd been a freight wagon guard first. Then, when that didn't pay enough, he'd taken bounties, tracking men, sometimes bringing them in alive, sometimes not. The territory paid well for dead outlaws. Didn't ask too many questions about how they ended up dead. 4 years ago, he'd finally saved enough blood money to buy land, to go straight, to stop being a hunter and become a rancher instead, to build something that didn't involve violence and death. Nayeli had believed in him, had believed he could change, had married him despite knowing what he'd been. She'd been wrong, and it had killed her. A wagon had rolled up his dusty path that morning 3 days ago, interrupting his dark thoughts. Expensive wagon, well made, pulled by matched horses that cost more than most men made in a year. The driver was Vincent Harlow, 40 years old maybe, dressed in a suit vest despite the morning heat, silver watch chain gleaming across his belly. Not a rancher, not a cowboy, a buyer. Mr. Cole, Harlow's voice had been smooth, practiced. Beautiful morning. Ethan had been wary immediately. Men in expensive clothes didn't visit dying ranches to admire the view. Can I help you? I'm an acquisitions agent. My clients are interested in purchasing land in this valley, your property specifically. Harlow had handed over a paper crisp and official looking. We're prepared to offer $400, cash, today. $400, against a debt of $650. I owe the bank more than that. Harlow had smiled, and the smile hadn't touched his eyes. Yes, I'm aware of your situation. Unfortunately, my offer is firm. However, between us, the bank will auction this place for maybe $200. You'll walk away with nothing. My offer puts money in your pocket and saves you the humiliation of losing it all publicly. Who's buying? Does it matter? Look around, Mr. Cole. This land is dying. The drought's not ending. The bank's not waiting. Take the money. Start fresh somewhere that actually has water. Ethan had felt anger rising in his chest, hot and familiar. Get off my property. Harlow's smile had thinned to a hard line. 9 days, Mr. Cole. Think about it. Think hard. Because this is the best offer you're going to get. He'd left wagon wheels raising dust that hung in the still air long after he'd disappeared. That evening, Ethan had ridden out to check his northern fence line, trying to work off the anger and frustration that had no good outlet. The foothills rose there rocky and sparse, good for nothing but rattlesnakes and scrub brush. That's where he'd found her. Ayana had been crouched by a small creek, washing blood from her hands. Her clothes were torn bruises darkening her face. A horse stood nearby, not hers, by the way it was saddled. Stolen, most likely. Ethan had dismounted slowly, hands visible, trying to project calm he didn't feel. Miss, you hurt? She'd spun knife appearing in her hand, faster than thought blade catching the fading sunlight. They'd stood frozen as silence stretched. Then Ethan had tried his broken Apache words Nayeli had taught him years ago. "I am friend, I not hurt you." Her eyes had narrowed, evaluating, measuring. "You speak our tongue like a child." Relief had flooded through him at the response. She spoke English. This would be easier. "I know. My wife taught me. She was Apache." "Are you hurt?" The woman had studied him carefully, knife still ready. "Ayanna, my name. Ethan Cole. This is my land. Well, for 9 more days anyway." "You're in debt." The statement had surprised him. "How do you know that?" "Everyone in the valley knows. The bank sells debts to speculators. They circle dying ranches like buzzards." She'd lowered the knife slightly. "The man in the fancy wagon. He came to you today." "You've been watching me. I've been hiding." "From who?" She hadn't answered. Instead, she'd made an offer that seemed impossible. "I can help you. With your debt." Ethan had laughed, bitter and tired. "Unless you've got $650, I don't see how." "Not money. Information." She'd moved closer, and he'd seen the intelligence in her eyes, the calculation. "There's gold on your land." Everything had stopped. The world had narrowed to those 4 words. What? Not a vein, not a mine. A deposit. Old, hidden, but enough to pay what you owe, maybe more. "How do you know this?" "Because my people have known about it for generations. We've never taken it because of what's there with it." "What's there?" Her eyes had held his, dark and serious. "The bones of our ancestors. A burial ground, old, sacred, hidden from white eyes for 200 years. She'd paused, letting the weight of it sink in. The gold is mixed with the graves. The full horror of what she was suggesting had hit him then. "You're saying I'd have to dig up graves to get the gold?" "Yes." "Why would you tell me this?" "Because I need protection. Men are hunting me. If I help you save your land, you help me stay hidden until I can leave the territory safely." "What men?" "White men. Apache men." "Does it matter? Will you help me or not?" Ethan had wanted to refuse. Every decent bone in his body had screamed to say no, to send her away, to find some other solution. But there was no other solution. The arithmetic didn't lie. And homeless men don't get to be picky about their morals. "I can't dig up graves." "Then you'll lose your land." "There has to be another way." "There isn't. I've been in this valley for weeks. I've listened. I've watched. Everyone is in debt. Everyone is desperate. The bank is owned by railroad interests who want this land empty." She'd stepped close enough that he could see the determination in her face. "You can be moral and homeless, or practical and alive. My wife was Apache. She would never forgive me if I desecrated her people's dead." The words had come out sharp, defensive. Ayanna's response had been brutal in its simplicity. "Your wife is dead. The dead don't pay debts." It had stung like a slap. True, but cruel. "I'll think about it, but tonight, you're hurt. You can stay in the barn. There's clean water blankets." "I stay in the house, where I can see the doors." "The house has 1 room and 1 bed. Then you sleep on the floor." Despite everything, despite the insanity of the situation, Ethan had almost smiled. "You're not much for gratitude, are you? Gratitude is for people who have the luxury of choice. I don't." That night, Ethan had given Ayanna the bed, taking the floor by the fireplace. Sleep had been impossible. His mind had turned over the problem again and again, looking for solutions that didn't exist. Graves, gold, debt, destruction. No matter how he arranged the pieces, the answer kept coming back to the same dark place. Around midnight, Ayanna's voice had come from the darkness. "Your wife. How did she really die?" Ethan had gone still, every muscle tensing. "Fever. I told you." "You're a bad liar." Silence had stretched between them, heavy and expectant. "I'll tell you why I know about the burial ground. Then you tell me about your wife. Fair trade." "Why does it matter?" "Because if we're going to trust each other with our lives, we should at least trust each other with our truths." The logic had been sound, even if Ethan hated it. "You first." He'd heard her shift in the bed, sitting up. "My brother was killed 3 years ago. shot by a bounty hunter who was tracking him for a crime he didn't commit. The real criminals were caught a week later. White men. But my brother was already dead, buried in an unmarked grave somewhere in this territory. Her voice had been steady, controlled, but Ethan had heard the pain underneath like bedrock under thin soil. The man who killed him took blood money, $500 for an innocent life. He used that money to buy land, to start over, to pretend he wasn't a killer. Ethan's blood had gone cold. What was your brother's name? Red Bear. The name had hit him like a bullet. Red Bear, the Apache warrior he'd tracked 3 years ago, the bounty he'd collected, the man he'd killed for $500 that became the down payment on this very ranch. The room had spun. His mouth had gone dry. Ayanna, your turn. How did your wife die? But Ethan's mind had been reeling, unable to form words, unable to process what she'd just said. Red Bear, the man whose death had bought this land, the man whose blood had paid for Ethan's attempt at redemption, and his sister was sleeping in Ethan's bed not 20 feet away. The universe had a cruel sense of irony. Now, riding through the darkness away from burning torches and angry men, Ethan understood that nothing about this situation was coincidence. Ayanna hadn't stumbled onto his land by accident, hadn't offered to help him out of kindness. She'd been hunting him. They rode until the horses couldn't go farther, finally stopping in a box canyon with high walls and only one entrance. Defensible. Hidden. Ayanna dismounted first, moving to the canyon wall where a thin seep of water trickled down. She drank, then filled a canteen. Her movements were efficient, economical, the actions of someone who'd spent a lifetime on the run. Ethan stayed on his horse, watching her. "You knew," he said finally. "That night in my cabin, you already knew who I was." She didn't turn around. "Yes?" "Red Bear was your brother." "Yes." "And you came to my ranch to kill me." "No." She turned now, meeting his eyes. "I came to watch you suffer." The honesty of it was almost refreshing. "Well, congratulations. I'm suffering. Not enough." She moved closer, and in the moonlight, her face was hard as the stone walls around them. "I wanted you to lose everything. Your land, your hope, your soul. I wanted you to become the monster you pretended not to be. By making me dig up graves." "Exactly. You'd save your ranch by desecrating the dead. You'd survive by becoming what you killed my brother for being. A man who does wrong for money." Her smile was cold and sharp. "That's my revenge. Watching you destroy yourself to save yourself." Ethan dismounted slowly, his legs stiff from hard riding. "Then you've wasted 2 years tracking me, because I'm not digging up those graves. Then you'll lose everything. I've already lost everything that mattered." He moved to his saddlebag, pulled out the one photograph he owned. Nayeli smiling, taken a month before she died. He held it so Ayanna could see. "You want to know how my wife really died? How the man who killed your brother ended up married to an Apache woman?" Ayanna said nothing, but she was listening. He could see it in the set of her shoulders, the way she'd gone still. "After I killed Red Bear, I took the blood money, $500, used it as down payment on land, thought I could wash the guilt away by becoming something different. A rancher, a settler, a man with a future instead of a past." He paused, the memory rising up sharp and painful. "I met Nayeli in Mesilla. She was working at a trading post. We talked. She made me laugh, made me feel like maybe I could actually be the person I was pretending to be." His voice roughened. "I told her what I'd been, didn't lie, didn't hide it, expected her to walk away. She didn't. She said everyone deserves a chance to change, to be better." Ayanna's expression hadn't changed, but something in her eyes had shifted. "We got married, built a life on that ranch. For 6 months I thought I'd actually done it, escaped my past, became someone new." The next part was harder, the part he'd never told anyone. "Then one night 2 Apache warriors came to the ranch. One of them was your father, Chief Dakota." Ayanna's breath caught, just slightly, but Ethan heard it. "They'd tracked me, knew I'd killed Red Bear, but they didn't come for revenge, they came for justice. The words were ash in his mouth. Your father said I'd killed his son for lies, that I owed a debt. He took Nayeli, not to kill her, to trade her back for me turning myself into the Apache Council for trial. He could still see Dakota's face that night. Sad, disappointed, but resolute. I refused, told them to take me instead, leave her alone. Your father said my guilt wasn't the question, my accountability was, that I needed to come willingly, face what I'd done, accept the consequences. Ethan's hands clenched on the photograph. I said no, said I'd come get her by force if I had to. Your father warned me, said if I came with violence, violence would answer. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I didn't listen. Got 3 men from town. We tracked them to a canyon about 10 miles from here. Tried to take Nayeli back by force. The next part came out broken. There was a firefight. Bullets everywhere. I was trying to get to Nayeli, trying to reach her before anyone got hurt. I fired at one of the warriors. The bullet hit rock. Ricocheted. He couldn't continue. Didn't need to. Ayanna's voice was quiet. It hit her. Yes. The word was a wound. She died, looking at me, trying to tell me something. I never heard what it was. Silence filled the canyon like water filling a well. Deep, cold, heavy. Finally, Ayanna spoke. My father never told me that part. Never told me she died by your hand. He probably wanted to spare you, or maybe he thought I'd suffer more living with it than dying for it. He was right. They stood in the darkness, 2 people bound by blood and death and secrets that weighed more than gold ever could. Ayanna's voice came again, different now, uncertain. I came here hating you, wanting to destroy you, but now I don't know what I want. Ethan looked at her, this woman who'd saved his life tonight despite having every reason to let him die. The truth about the gold, is it really there? Yes, on your northern 40 acres, about 6 feet down, mixed with bones from a massacre 200 years ago. My people call it the place of sorrows. If I don't dig it up, what happens to you? You said men are hunting you. Her jaw tightened. My father sent warriors to bring me back. I refused an arranged marriage to a chief's son from another tribe. Political alliance. I ran. She touched the bruises on her face. They caught me once. I escaped. They'll come again. And the white men. The ones who attacked tonight. The man in the fancy wagon, Harlow. He knows about the gold, too. He's been buying up all the land in this area. If he gets yours, he'll dig up the graves without a second thought. Without ceremony, without respect. The full picture was becoming clear now, brutal in its simplicity. So our choices are, I dig up the graves and save my land, or Harlow gets it and digs them up anyway. Or you lose the land, I get caught and forced into marriage, and Harlow still gets the gold. We're both trapped. Yes. Ethan turned the problem over in his mind, looking for the third option, the way out that didn't involve losing everything or betraying everything. What if we move the graves respectfully, with proper ceremony? Rebury the remains somewhere safe, somewhere Harlow can't get to, then take the gold. Ayanna's eyes narrowed. That's still desecration. It's preservation. We'd be protecting them from what Harlow would do, which is dump them in a ravine and strip the gold without care. You're trying to rationalize. I'm trying to find a solution where nobody loses everything. His voice rose, echoing off the canyon walls. I'm trying to find a way that doesn't end with you married off against your will, me homeless in the dirt, and your ancestors bulldozed for profit. The echo faded. Silence returned. Ayanna stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. If we do this, my father can never know. The warriors hunting me can never know. Harlow can never know. Agreed. And we do it right. Proper ceremonies, proper reburial. We honor the dead even as we move them. I'll follow your lead on that. And when it's done, you help me get to Santa Fe. Help me disappear. What about your revenge? She looked at him, and something in her expression had softened just slightly. Maybe making you live with the choice is revenge enough. They shook hands. The deal was struck, but both knew this was a temporary alliance built on mutual desperation, not trust. Built on necessity, not friendship. They were using each other to survive, nothing more. At least that's what they told themselves, as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, painting the canyon walls in shades of rose and gold. Ethan looked at the woman who was his enemy's sister, his wife's people, his unexpected savior. Those men tonight, they'll be back. I know. And they'll have more friends. I know. We're running out of time. Ayanna smiled thin and hard. Then we'd better work fast. The sun rose over New Mexico territory, indifferent to the choices being made beneath it, indifferent to the graves about to be opened, the secrets about to be revealed, the blood about to be spilled. The land kept its silence as it always had, but the people on it were about to make enough noise to wake the dead. Dawn came too quickly, painting the canyon walls in colors that seemed too beautiful for what they were about to do. Ethan woke stiff and cold, his body protesting a night spent on hard ground with only a saddle for a pillow. Ayanna was already awake, sitting cross-legged near the canyon entrance, watching the land beyond with the patience of a hunter. "They're still out there," she said without turning. "I saw dust on the eastern ridge just before sunrise. 3 riders, maybe 4. Ethan stood working the kinks out of his back. "Harlow's men? Probably. Or my father's warriors. Hard to tell from this distance." The casual way she mentioned both threats, as if being hunted by land speculators and Apache warriors simultaneously, was just another Tuesday, would have been funny if it wasn't so dangerous. They ate a cold breakfast of hardtack and jerky, washing it down with canteen water that tasted of metal and old leather. Not talking much. Both of them knew what came next, and neither wanted to speak it aloud yet, as if saying the words would make it more real. Ayanna stood brushing crumbs from her clothes. "We need to go back to your ranch, get supplies, tools for digging." "They'll be watching it." "I know, but we don't have a choice. We need shovels, canvas for wrapping the remains rope." She looked at him directly. "And we need to move fast. I give us 2 days, maybe 3, before either Harlow or my father's men close the net completely." The ride back took an hour, circling wide to approach from the west, where the foothills provided cover. They left the horses hidden in a draw and covered the last quarter-mile on foot, moving from rock to scrub brush to shallow arroyo. The ranch looked different in daylight. Violated. The front door hung open, one hinge broken. Windows were shattered. Ethan's small vegetable garden had been trampled plants crushed into the dirt, but no one was there. The attackers from last night had left, taking their dead with them. "They're not stupid enough to stay in the open," Ayanna whispered. "They'll be watching from the ridges. We have maybe 20 minutes before they spot us and come running." They moved fast. Ethan grabbed 2 shovels from the barn, a coil of rope, a canvas tarp he'd been saving for winter repairs. Ayanna went into the cabin, emerging with his canteens, a box of ammunition, and something else. The photograph of Nayeli. She held it out to him. "You left this last night in the canyon." Ethan took it carefully, tucking it into his shirt pocket. "Thank you." For a moment something passed between them. Not quite understanding, not yet trust, but maybe the beginning of something that could become those things given time. Then a whistle cut the air. Apache signal. Close. "Go," Ayanna hissed. They ran for the horses, not bothering with stealth anymore. Behind them, riders appeared on the ridge to the east, 3 of them moving fast, but not Apache, white men. Harlow's hired guns. Ethan and Ayanna reached their mounts, swung into saddles, and kicked the horses into a gallop, all in one fluid motion. Behind them, gunfire cracked, bullets whined overhead, kicking up dirt. They rode hard for the foothills, using the broken terrain to their advantage. The men behind them had speed, but Ayanna knew this land like a map written on her soul. She led them through gaps in rocks that looked impassable, across creek beds that hid their tracks, up slopes that left the pursuing horses winded. After an hour, they'd lost them, at least for now. "The northern boundary," Ethan said, breathing hard. "We need to get there while we still have daylight." Ayanna nodded, turning her horse north. The place of sorrows didn't look like much, just a shallow depression in the foothills hidden by mesquite and rock outcroppings. Easy to miss unless you knew exactly where to look. The ground was hard-packed earth scattered with stones, giving no sign of what lay beneath. Ayana dismounted slowly as if approaching something holy or something cursed, maybe both. She knelt, placing her palm flat against the ground, and spoke words in Apache. Low, rhythmic. A prayer, or a warning, or an apology. Maybe all three. Ethan stood back, giving her space, feeling like an intruder at a funeral. When she finished, she stood and looked at him. My grandmother told me about this place, told me never to speak of it to white men, told me the bones here were sacred, that they held the spirits of our ancestors who died fighting the Spanish 200 years ago. 23 people, men, women, children, slaughtered and buried in secret so the Spanish wouldn't desecrate the bodies further. Her voice was steady, but Ethan could hear the weight underneath. For 200 years, only the women of my family have known the exact location. We kept it secret, protected it, and now I'm about to violate that trust. We don't have to do this, Ethan said, though even as he spoke the words he knew they were hollow. They both knew there was no other way. Yes, we do. She picked up one of the shovels. But we do it right. We ask permission. We perform the ceremonies. We treat them with honor even as we move them. Ayana gathered sage from the surrounding scrub, lit it with flint and steel, let the smoke rise into the still air. She spoke again, in Apache, longer this time, explaining, asking, promising. Then she thrust the shovel into the earth. The first cut into the ground felt like breaking a seal that should never be broken. The earth was hard, resistant, as if the land itself was fighting them. They worked in silence, the only sounds the scrape of shovels and their own labored breathing. 6 feet, Ayana had said. They dug carefully, methodically, trying not to think about what they were doing, trying not to feel the wrongness of it settling into their bones. 3 feet down, Ethan's shovel hit something that wasn't rock. He stopped, his hands suddenly shaking. I found something. Ayana knelt beside the hole, brushing dirt away with her hands. A piece of cloth appeared old, beyond measure, disintegrating at her touch. Beneath it the curve of bone, small, delicate. A child's skull. Ayana made a sound deep in her throat, something between a sob and a prayer. Her hands moved with sudden gentleness, clearing dirt away from the tiny skeleton with a care that made Ethan's chest ache. A girl, Ayana whispered. Maybe 5 years old, maybe 6. She pulled the canvas tarp closer, began the process of carefully transferring the small bones onto it, wrapping them, honoring them even in this violation. I'm sorry, she kept saying over and over. I'm so sorry. They worked through the afternoon uncovering the dead, 23 bodies just as Ayana's grandmother had said. Men, women, children, each one carefully wrapped in canvas, each one adding to the weight pressing on their souls, and mixed in with the bones scattered through the soil like seeds, pieces of gold, nuggets ranging from the size of corn kernels to hen's eggs. Not a fortune, not the kind of wealth that built empires, but enough to pay debts, enough to change lives. Ethan collected it in a leather pouch, trying not to think about where it had come from, what it had witnessed, how long it had rested with the dead. By the time the sun touched the western horizon, they were done. 23 canvas-wrapped bundles laid carefully to one side, a leather pouch heavy with gold, and a hole in the ground that looked like an open wound. Ayana was shaking, not from cold or exhaustion, though both were there, from something deeper, something breaking inside her. We just robbed graves, she said, her voice hollow. I just violated 200 years of trust, betrayed my grandmother's memory, desecrated the dead I was supposed to protect. Ethan wanted to offer comfort, but what could he say? She was right. They had done exactly what she said. The fact that they'd done it carefully, respectfully, with ceremony and prayer, didn't change the fundamental truth. We'll rebury them properly, he said. Somewhere safe, somewhere Harlow can never find them. Will that make it right? No, but it's all we can do. Night fell as they loaded the bundles onto a makeshift travois they'd rigged behind Ayana's horse. 23 souls reduced to canvas and bone being dragged across the desert, by people who'd violated their rest. "There's a canyon," Ayana said, her voice dull with exhaustion and grief. 3 miles north, hidden, sacred to my people but not widely known. Harlow doesn't know about it. We can rebury them there." The journey took 3 hours in the darkness, following paths only Ayana could see. Every bump in the trail felt like another insult to the dead. Every jolt of the travois, another sin added to the tally. The canyon, when they reached it, was narrow and deep, its walls rising 100 feet on either side. At the far end, a spring bubbled from the rock, creating a small pool that reflected starlight like scattered diamonds. "This is Tso," Ayana said, "the big cottonwood, one of our holy places. The spring never runs dry, even in drought. My people come here for vision quests, for healing ceremonies." She looked at Ethan. "If we bury them here, they'll be protected. This land will never be sold or developed. It's too isolated, too sacred. Even white men respect some boundaries." They dug again. One large grave, properly oriented according to Apache tradition, that Ayana explained as they worked. East to west, facing the rising sun. The earth here was softer, easier to move, as if the land itself was helping them. As they placed each bundle in the ground, Ayana performed ceremonies, spoke names if she knew them, spoke prayers if she didn't, burned sage, made offerings of cornmeal and tobacco. Ethan helped, following her instructions, speaking words in Apache that she taught him. Feeling the weight of what they were doing settled deeper with each body they laid to rest. When the last bundle was placed, when the grave was filled and marked with stones, Ayana collapsed to her knees and wept. Not quietly, not gently. Great racking sobs that shook her whole body. Ethan stood helpless, not knowing what to do, whether to offer comfort or leave her alone with her grief. Finally he knelt beside her, not touching, just present. "I betrayed them," she said between sobs. "I betrayed my people, my ancestors, everything I was supposed to protect. You saved them from something worse. That doesn't make it right. No, it doesn't. But it makes it necessary." He paused. "Sometimes there are no good choices, only less terrible ones." She looked at him, tears tracking through the dust on her face. "Is that what you told yourself when you killed my brother, that it was necessary?" The question hit hard, but it was fair. "Yes, and I was wrong. I made a choice based on greed and called it necessity. I killed an innocent man and called it justice." He looked at him directly. "But this actually is necessary. Because if we'd left them, Harlow would have scattered them like trash within a week. At least this way they rest in sacred ground, with ceremony, with honor." "Honor." She spat the word. "What do you know about honor?" "Nothing. I know nothing about honor. But you do. And if you say we dishonored them, I'll believe you. If you say this was wrong, I'll carry that truth." He gestured at the grave. "But I also know they're safer here than they were in that hole on my land. And that has to count for something." Ayana didn't respond, just stared at the stones marking the grave, her face unreadable. They rode back as dawn broke, the leather pouch of gold heavy in Ethan's saddlebag. $750 worth, he estimated. More than enough to pay the bank. More than enough to save the ranch. Blood money. Ghost money. Guilt made tangible and weighed in ounces. As they approached Ethan's property from the north, staying low in the arroyos, Ayana held up a hand. "Stop." Ethan reined in, following her gaze. Riders on the ridge overlooking his ranch. Too far to identify, but Ethan didn't need to see faces to know who'd sent them. "Harlow's men," Ayana confirmed. "Watching. Waiting." "For what?" "For us to show ourselves. For you to try to get into town to pay the bank." She turned her horse. "We need to find another way." But there was no other way. The bank was in Mesilla, 15 miles south, through open country. They'd be spotted before they made it halfway. Unless... "What if we don't go to the bank?" Ethan said slowly, an idea forming. "What if we make the bank come to us?" Ayana frowned. "How?" "Samuel Briggs, rancher about 10 miles west. We've helped each other over the years, shared equipment, traded labor. If I can get word to him, he could take the money to the bank for me, make the payment on my behalf. You'd trust him with $700. I'd trust Sam with my life. Famous last words, as it turned out. They circled wide, staying in the broken country where pursuing riders would have trouble following. It took most of the day to reach the Briggs Ranch, approaching from the north, where thick stands of cottonwood along the creek provided cover. The Briggs place was small but well-maintained. Neat fences, whitewashed barn, a garden that actually had vegetables growing in it, unlike Ethan's trampled disaster. Samuel Briggs was in his corral, working with a young horse on a lead line. 50 years old, weathered face, kind eyes, the sort of man who'd give you his last dollar if you needed it. He looked up as Ethan and Ayanna rode in surprise, crossing his face. "Ethan, heard you had some trouble last night. Men were asking around town about you. Not the friendly sort." "Sam, I need help." Something in Ethan's voice made Samuel's expression shift. "Come inside. Both of you." In the small kitchen with Samuel's wife Clara making coffee, and deliberately not asking questions, Ethan explained. "Not everything. Not the graves. Not the gold's true source. But enough. I have the money to pay the bank, $750. But Harlow has men watching the roads. If I try to go to Mesilla myself, they'll stop me." Samuel's face darkened at Harlow's name. "That vulture. He came by here last month, offered me $300 for my land. I owe $450. When I said no, he got mean about it, implied things might get difficult for me if I didn't cooperate. Will you take the money to the bank for me? Make the payment on my behalf?" Samuel didn't hesitate. "Of course. We look out for each other out here. That's how we survive." Relief flooded through Ethan like cool water. "Thank you, Sam. I won't forget this." "No need for thanks between friends." Samuel took the leather pouch, weighing it in his hand. "I'll ride out at first light tomorrow. Should reach the bank by noon. You'll be clear by tomorrow evening." They stayed for dinner, Clara insisting feeding them the first hot meal they'd had in days. Stew and fresh bread and coffee that didn't taste like metal. Normal food in a normal house with normal people who weren't being hunted or digging up graves. For a few hours, Ethan could almost forget the weight of what they'd done. Almost. As the sun set, painting the western sky in shades of blood and gold, Samuel walked them to their horses. "Ethan, be careful. Harlow's not the type to give up just because you paid your debt. Men like him, they decide they want something, they don't stop until they get it or die trying." "I know, but at least this way I'll have legal title. He can't just take it." Samuel's expression was odd, troubled. "Just watch yourself. And if you need anything at all, you come here. Understand? I understand. Thank you, Sam." They rode into the gathering darkness, heading for a campsite Ayanna knew about, well hidden and defensible. Behind them in the Briggs kitchen, Samuel stood at the window watching them disappear. His face was troubled. Guilty. In his pocket, folded small, was a letter. Instructions from Vincent Harlow, telling him exactly what to do when Ethan Cole came asking for help. Samuel had a wife, 3 daughters. He owed $450 to a bank that Harlow controlled. He'd already missed 2 payments. One more and they'd lose everything. Harlow had made it simple. Help deliver Ethan Cole, get the debt forgiven, refuse and lose the ranch, the home, everything. What choice did he have? Samuel Briggs was not a bad man, but he was a desperate one. And desperate men make choices they never thought they'd make. As Clara came up behind him, putting a gentle hand on his shoulder, Samuel closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the darkness where Ethan had disappeared. "God forgive me, I'm so sorry." But sorry wouldn't stop what was coming. The campsite Ayanna chose was a defensive masterpiece. A small box canyon with walls too steep to climb, only one entrance, and a clear view of anyone approaching. They built a small fire screened by rocks so it wouldn't be visible from a distance. Ethan checked and rechecked his rifle. Counted ammunition. 32 rounds. Not enough if Harlow came with numbers. Ayanna was quieter than usual, staring into the fire with an expression that Ethan couldn't read. Thinking about the graves, probably. about what they'd done, about the weight they'd both have to carry for the rest of their lives. "Tomorrow," Ethan said, trying to break the heavy silence, "Sam takes the money to the bank. By noon, my debt is paid. The ranch is legally mine and Harlow can't touch it. You think it'll be that simple? I think it's the best chance we have." Ayanna poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. "And then what Harlow just gives up, rides away, finds some other rancher to torment. Maybe. Or maybe he tries something else, but at least we'll have the law on our side." "The law." She laughed bitter. "The law that lets you kill my brother for money and walk away free, that law." The words stung, but Ethan couldn't argue with them. "I know the law isn't perfect, but it's what we have." "No, it's what you have. My people don't have the law. We have treaties that get broken, promises that get ignored, land that gets stolen with legal papers and fancy words." She looked at him across the fire. "You think paying the bank makes you safe, but Harlow isn't bound by papers and debts. He wants something, he'll find a way to take it. And when he does, the law won't protect you any more than it protected my brother." Before Ethan could respond, a whistle cut through the night. Apache signal. Close, too close. They were on their feet instantly, rifles ready, scanning the darkness beyond the firelight. A voice called from the shadows, speaking Apache. Ayanna answered, lowering her rifle slightly. "It's Kuruk, my uncle, my father's war chief." She raised her voice, still speaking Apache. "Come forward slowly, we have guns." Two men emerged from the darkness. The first was the warrior who'd been watching Ethan's ranch days ago. The second was older, maybe 35, with a face like carved stone and eyes that missed nothing. Kuruk. He looked at Ayanna with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. Disappointment, sadness, anger. All three, maybe. Then he turned those eyes on Ethan, and there was nothing ambiguous about that look. Pure hatred. "You," Kuruk said in English, heavily accented but clear, "the man who killed Red Bear." Ethan's hand tightened on his rifle but didn't raise it. "Yes. My chief wants you dead." "Then why are you talking to me instead of shooting me?" Kuruk's jaw clenched. "Because my chief also wants the white land stealer dead more." He gestured toward where Harlow's men had last been seen. "That one, Harlow. He plans evil, not just against you, against all my people." Ethan and Ayanna exchanged glances. "What kind of evil?" Ethan asked. Kuruk pulled something from his belt, a rolled paper stained and wrinkled. He handed it to Ethan. It was a survey map, professionally drawn, detailed, showing the entire Mesilla Valley region, and marked on it in red ink were 6 locations, each one labeled with Apache names that Ethan couldn't read, but Ayanna clearly could. Her face went pale. "These are sacred sites, all of them, burial grounds, ceremony locations, places where treaties were signed." Kuruk nodded grimly. "Harlow plans to dig them all up. Take gold, take silver, take copper, whatever he finds. He has equipment, men, approval from corrupt officials in Santa Fe." "How do you know this?" Ethan demanded. "We have eyes, we have ears. A Mexican worker in Harlow's camp, he talks when he drinks, tells stories about the White Devil's plans, about maps and mining rights and making himself rich on Apache bones." The other warrior spoke in Apache. Kuruk listened, then translated. "He says Harlow bragged, said once he gets your land coal, he will use it as base camp. From there, he will strip every sacred site in the valley. He says the railroad is coming. The army is coming. The Apache will be pushed to reservations, and no one will care what happens to empty land." Ethan felt cold spreading through his chest. "If that's true, if he's planning all that, then my ranch is just the beginning." "Yes." Kuruk's eyes bored into him. "Which is why you will help us kill him." The word hung in the air like smoke. "Murder," Ethan said flatly. "War," Kuruk corrected. "He makes war on our dead. We make war on him." Ayanna stepped forward. "Uncle, if you kill Harlow, more will come. The railroad will send soldiers. The territory will send marshals. You'll bring the full weight of white law down on our people. Then what would you have us do? Stand by while they dig up our ancestors, while they piss on our sacred places, while they profit from our bones. No, we expose him, make what he's planning public, get newspapers involved, force the territorial government to act. Kuruk spat into the dirt. White man's papers, white man's government, they will do nothing, they never do. Maybe. But killing him guarantees they'll come after you with everything they have. At least this way there's a chance. The two warriors conferred in Apache voices, low and intense. Kuruk turned back. What is your plan? Ethan's mind was racing, trying to fit the pieces together. Harlow has to have documents, permits, letters, maps, proof of what he's planning. If we can get those, take them to a newspaper, to territorial officials, we can expose him, destroy his plans without starting a war. And how do we get these documents? We steal them from his camp or his office or wherever he keeps them. We take everything, make copies, distribute them before he can stop us. Kuruk was silent for a long moment. Then, and if this fails, if the white men do nothing even with proof, then you can kill him with my blessing, but give this a chance first. More discussion in Apache between Kuruk and the other warrior, sharp, heated. Finally Kuruk nodded. We will try your way, but know this, Cole. If you betray us, if this is some trick to save your own skin, I will kill you slowly. I will make you beg for the death you gave Red Bear. Understood. Tomorrow night, we attack Harlow's camp, create distraction. While he and his men are busy with us, you and Ayanna steal the documents from his field office. Where's the field office? The old trading post, 10 miles south. He uses it as headquarters. Ethan knew the place, abandoned for years, falling apart. Perfect cover for illegal operations. What kind of distraction? Kuruk smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. The kind that makes men afraid, the kind that makes them forget to watch their backs. Plans were made, details worked out, timing coordinated, and through it all Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were building a house of cards in a windstorm. Too many moving parts, too many ways it could go wrong. But what choice did they have? As the warriors prepared to leave, Kuruk approached Ayanna. Your father is disappointed. He sent me to bring you home. I will tell him I could not find you. Thank you, uncle. Do not thank me. I disagree with him on this. You made your choice. You must live with it. He glanced at Ethan. But know that if this white man harms you, family or no family, I will make him suffer. He won't harm me. He already did. He killed your brother. How can you stand to be near him? Ayanna's voice was quiet but firm. Because revenge doesn't bring back the dead. And because he's trying to be better than he was. That has to count for something. Kuruk grunted, unconvinced, and disappeared into the darkness with his companion. The night stretched long after they left. Ethan and Ayanna sat by the dying fire, not talking much, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Ayanna spoke. You're planning to betray them. Ethan looked at her sharply. What? My uncle. This alliance. You're planning to take what you need and abandon them. I can see it in your face. That's not true. I want to help. You want to save your ranch. Everything else is just noise. The accusation stung because it was partially true. The ranch was what mattered most, but not everything. I want to stop Harlow, Ethan said carefully. And if that helps your people too, then everyone wins. And if it comes down to a choice, your ranch or our sacred sites, Ethan held her gaze, but didn't have a good answer for that. Ayanna stood moving to check on the horses, and Ethan was left alone with the uncomfortable truth that she was right to doubt him. He'd spent years being a bounty hunter, making choices based on profit and survival. Old habits didn't die easy, but maybe, just maybe, this time could be different. He had to believe that. Had to believe he could be better than the man who'd killed Red Bear for $500. Because if he couldn't change, if he couldn't be better, then what was the point of any of this? The fire burned down to embers. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. And Ethan Cole sat in the darkness, trying to convince himself that he was capable of being the man this situation needed him to be. Dawn would come soon, and with it, decisions that would define what kind of man he really was. Tomorrow, they would raid Harlow's office. Tomorrow, they would steal the proof they needed. Tomorrow, they would take the first real step toward redemption or damnation. Ethan just had to figure out which one it would be and hope he made the right choice when it mattered. The night passed without incident, but morning brought trouble riding hard from the south. Ethan woke to Ayana's hand on his shoulder, her other hand pressed against his mouth to keep him quiet. She pointed toward the canyon entrance, where dust rose in the still morning air. Riders, multiple horses moving fast. They broke camp in silence, working with the efficiency of people who'd learned that speed meant survival. Saddles thrown on, gear lashed down, fire scattered and covered. 3 minutes from wake to mounted, and they were moving north through the broken country. Behind them, the riders entered the canyon. 6 men, maybe 7. Too far to identify, but close enough to be dangerous. "How did they find us?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice low, even though distance made that unnecessary. "Someone talked. Someone always talks." Ayana's face was grim. "Or they got lucky. Doesn't matter now." They pushed the horses hard using terrain that would slow pursuers, through narrow gaps in rock formations, across creek beds where water would hide their tracks, up slopes that required dismounting and leading the horses by hand. But the men behind them were persistent, and they had numbers. Every time Ethan thought they'd lost them, dust would appear on a ridge, or the faint sound of hooves would echo from an unexpected direction. "They're hurting us," Ayana said suddenly. "Look, every time we turn east or west, they appear to cut us off. They're pushing us north." She was right. The pursuit had a pattern, a purpose. Into a trap, maybe, or just into open country where they can run us down. The land ahead was opening up, the broken hills giving way to flatter terrain where there'd be no place to hide, no advantage to be gained from knowing the ground. Ethan scanned the horizon desperately looking for options. His eyes caught on a geological formation to the northwest. A mesa flat-topped and steep-sided, rising maybe 100 feet above the surrounding plain. "There," he said, pointing. "We can make a stand." Ayana followed his gaze and understood immediately. High ground, limited approaches, defensible. Also a potential death trap if they got pinned down. "Better than being run to ground in the open," she agreed. They angled toward the mesa, and as they did, the pursuit became more aggressive. The riders behind them closed distance, no longer trying to be subtle. Gunfire cracked across the morning air. Bullets kicked up dirt 20 yards behind them. Warning shots or bad aim. Either way, the message was clear. Stop or die. They didn't stop. The mesa loomed closer. A switchback trail led to the top narrow enough that only one horse could climb at a time. Perfect for defense. Terrible for escape. They reached the base and started up. The horses struggled on the steep incline hooves, slipping on loose rock. Behind them, their pursuers arrived at the bottom and began the climb. Ethan and Ayana crested the top and dismounted fast. The mesa summit was maybe 50 yards across, relatively flat, scattered with boulders that would provide cover. The view in all directions was spectacular and terrifying. No way down except the trail they just climbed. They set up defensive positions behind the largest rocks, rifles, ready spare ammunition, laid out within easy reach. Below, the riders stopped at the base of the mesa. Smart. They'd learned the hard way that charging up that trail would be suicide. A voice called up, amplified by the rock walls. "Mr. Cole, you're making this harder than it needs to be." Vincent Harlow. Even from 100 feet away, Ethan could hear the false friendliness in his tone. "Give me the documents you stole and I'll make your death quick. Keep running, and I promise you'll beg for a bullet before I'm done." Ethan didn't respond. Watched the men below spreading out, looking for other ways up. There weren't any, but they had to check. "What documents is he talking about?" Ayana whispered. "I don't know. We haven't stolen anything yet." "Then someone's lying to him. Told him we already have what we were planning to steal tonight." The implications of that sank in slowly. Someone had betrayed them, told Harlow about the plan before they could execute it, but who only 4 people knew. Ethan, Ayana Kuruk, and the other warrior. Unless... No. Sam couldn't. But the cold feeling spreading through Ethan's gut said otherwise. "We need help," Ayanna said. "Kuruk and his warriors. They were supposed to attack Harlow's camp tonight, but if we can signal them somehow, get them here instead." She pulled out a small mirror from her saddlebag, angled it to catch the morning sun, started flashing signals, Apache code that Ethan didn't understand but hoped someone out there did. Below, Harlow had finished his assessment. "Boys, take that hill." 4 men started up the trail, spread out as much as the narrow path would allow, moving cautiously, but with the confidence of people who'd done this before. Ethan let them get 30 yards up, close enough that missing would be hard, far enough that retreat would be possible. "Now!" he fired. Ayanna fired. 2 rifles speaking nearly as one. 2 men went down. One caught in the leg screaming, the other hit in the shoulder, tumbling backward into the man behind him. They scrambled back down, dragging their wounded. Harlow's voice rose in fury. "Flank them! Find another way up!" But there was no other way. The mesa sides were sheer, unclimbable without equipment they didn't have. They tried twice more over the next hour. Each time Ethan and Ayanna drove them back. But each assault cost ammunition they couldn't afford to waste. Ethan counted his remaining rounds. 18. Ayanna had maybe 15. Against 7 men who could afford to be patient, who could wait for them to run dry, who had water and food and time on their side. The math was brutal and simple. They couldn't win, only delay the inevitable. "We need a miracle," Ethan said. As if summoned by the words, movement appeared on the western ridge. Riders, many of them, coming fast. For a moment Ethan's heart lifted, thinking it might be help. Then he saw the riders more clearly. Apache warriors, 20 of them at least, and at their head a figure he'd only seen once before but would never forget. Chief Takota. Ayanna's father had come. Whether as savior or executioner remained to be seen. The Apache swept down from the ridge like a storm, war cries splitting the air. They didn't attack Harlow's men immediately. Instead, they surrounded the mesa base, forming a perimeter that trapped Harlow's force between the Apache and Ethan's position above. Takota rode forward alone, stopping 20 yards from where Harlow stood with his remaining men. The chief was 60 years old, but sat his horse like a man half that age. His face could have been carved from the same rock as the mesa behind him. He spoke, his voice carrying despite not shouting. "White man, you are on Apache land. Leave now." Harlow recovered from his surprise quickly. Too quickly. He'd been expecting this or something like it. "This isn't your land anymore, old man. This is United States territory. You have no authority here." "Do I look like I care about your papers?" Takota gestured to his warriors. "Leave or die. Those are your choices." Harlow's hand moved toward his gun, then stopped. He was outnumbered 4-1. Starting a gunfight would be suicide. But his voice stayed confident. Too confident. "You're bluffing. You attack us, the army will hunt you down. They'll use this as an excuse to push your people onto reservations, strip away what little freedom you have left." Takota's expression didn't change. "The army is 3 days away. You will be dead in 3 minutes. I'm willing to make that trade." Mexican standoff. Harlow's guns versus Apache arrows versus Ethan and Ayanna on the mesa above. 3 forces each capable of killing the others, each waiting to see who would break first. Takota called up to the mesa top, speaking Apache. Ayanna responded, her voice steady, despite the circumstances. The chief switched to English, probably for Harlow's benefit. "Ayanna, my daughter, are you alive?" "Yes, father." "Did this man Cole harm you?" "No, he protected me." "Did you dig up the place of sorrows?" Silence stretched. Ayanna's hands clenched on her rifle. She answered. "Yes." Gasps from the Apache warriors. Even Takota's stone face cracked slightly. "Why, to save the bones from him." Ayanna pointed down at Harlow. "He was going to destroy them, scatter them like garbage. We moved them, reburied them with ceremony at Teist So." Takota's eyes shifted to Ethan. "You desecrated sacred ground." Ethan stood, making himself visible, making himself a target if the chief decided to take it. We honored the dead, performed ceremonies, did what was necessary to protect them from a man who would have shown no respect at all, and took the gold. Yes, I won't lie about it. I needed it to save my land, but I swear on my wife's grave the remains were treated with reverence. The warrior who'd been observing them spoke up in Apache, confirming the story Ethan guessed. Dakota listened, his face unreadable. The chief turned back to Harlow. You plan to desecrate our sacred sites. Harlow's confidence wavered for the first time. I don't know what you're talking about. Liar. Dakota pulled something from his belt. A rolled paper. The same survey map Kuruk had shown them. We know your plans. 6 sacred sites, all marked for destruction. Harlow's face went pale. Where did you get that? From the Mexican who works for you. He drinks too much, talks too much, told us everything. Harlow tried to recover. That map is nothing. Just survey work. Legal and approved by territorial authorities. Then you won't mind if we keep it. Show it to newspapers. Let them decide if it's legal. Harlow's hand went to his gun again, and this time he drew it. Fast. Smooth. Aimed not at Dakota, but up at the mesa. At Ayanna. Give me that map, or the girl dies. Everything happened at once. Ethan dove for Ayanna, trying to get between her and Harlow's gun. Dakota's bow sang, arrow flying faster than thought. Harlow's gun roared. The bullet hit rock inches from where Ayanna had been standing. Ethan's body covered hers, waiting for more shots. None came. Harlow was on the ground, Dakota's arrow buried in his right shoulder. The gun had fallen from nerveless fingers. He was screaming. The chief's voice cut through the sound. I said leave. Now you crawl. Harlow's men looked at each other, looked at their wounded boss, looked at the Apache warriors surrounding them with arrows drawn. One by one they mounted their horses. Abandoned Harlow rode away fast, not looking back. Harlow tried to stand, fell, tried again, made it to his knees. Blood soaked his expensive shirt. This isn't over, he gasped. I have friends, powerful friends. The territorial governor himself gave me those mining rights. You can't stop what's coming. Dakota rode closer, looking down at the wounded man with something like pity. Perhaps, but you won't be here to see it. Go, and if you return, I will finish what I started. Harlow crawled to his horse, managed to mount using only his left arm. He rode off broken and bleeding, his grand plans shattered. But as he disappeared over the ridge, Ethan felt no triumph, only dread. Because Harlow was right. He had powerful friends. And powerful friends didn't give up just because one man failed. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. On the mesa, Dakota called up again. Come down, we must talk. Ethan and Ayanna descended carefully, leading their horses down the narrow trail. When they reached the bottom, Dakota was waiting, alone. The other warriors had pulled back, giving them space. The chief looked at Ayanna first, his face a complex mix of emotions. You dishonored your people. I saved their bones from worse dishonor. You consorted with the man who killed your brother. I learned that revenge doesn't bring back the dead, only purpose does. Dakota was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Ethan. You are a man of many crimes. Yes, but also a man who keeps his word. The remains were truly reburied properly. Yes, I swear it. Then you have paid one debt, but you still owe another, to Red Bear, to my son. Ethan's throat tightened. I know. I'll carry that debt until I die. Good. Guilt keeps a man honest. Dakota studied him. My daughter says you protected her. Is this true? I tried. She also says you gave up gold to honor the dead rather than profit from their desecration. Ethan turned toward Ayanna, surprised she'd shared that detail. The gold felt wrong, tainted. We're giving it back, all of it. Something shifted in Dakota's expression. Not quite approval, but close. You continue to surprise me, Ethan Cole. Most white men I know would have taken the gold and called it justice for their troubles. I'm trying to be better than most white men. A low bar, but perhaps high enough. Dakota turned his horse. "Go, both of you. I will not stop you, but know this, Cole. If you harm my daughter, if you betray the trust she has placed in you, there will be no place in this territory where you can hide from me." "Understood." Dakota rode toward his warriors, then stopped, turned back. "One more thing. The map Harlow has. The survey showing our sacred sites. There are more copies in his office, in Santa Fe, in Washington. Destroying one map changes nothing. Then what do we do? You tell me. You're the one who thinks white man's law can fix this." The challenge hung in the air. Ethan felt the weight of it settling on his shoulders. Dakota rode away, his warriors following. But as they crested the ridge, Kuruk, separated from the group, rode back alone. He approached Ayanna. "Your father wanted me to bring you home, by force if necessary." "And will you?" Kuruk smiled slightly. "I told him I couldn't find you, that you had vanished like smoke." His expression turned serious. "But I disagree with him on one thing. You made your choice. You must live with it, for better or worse." He glanced at Ethan. "If this white man proves worthy of your trust, then perhaps your father will accept it in time. If not—" He let the threat hang unfinished. Then he too was gone, leaving Ethan and Ayanna alone in the shadow of the mesa. They stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, Ayanna spoke. "We need to go to Mesilla, to the bank. Samuel should have paid your debt by now." Samuel. The name sent ice through Ethan's veins. "Sam betrayed us," he said quietly. "He's the only one who knew we were planning to steal documents from Harlow, the only one who could have told him." Ayanna's eyes widened. "You're sure? Who else could it be? Then why did he agree to take your money to the bank?" "Good question. One that Ethan didn't have an answer for. We need to find out, before it's too late." They rode hard for Mesilla, pushing the horses to their limits. The sun climbed high, then began its descent toward evening. The miles disappeared beneath pounding hooves. As they approached the town from the north, staying off the main road, Ethan's sense of wrongness grew stronger. Something was off. The quality of the light. The silence where there should have been sounds of daily life. They left the horses hidden in a stand of cottonwoods and approached on foot. Careful, watching. Mesilla looked normal at first glance. People on the streets, shops open, life continuing. But there were more men than usual. Hard-looking men in groups of 2 or 3, watching, waiting, Harlow's people. "We need to get to the bank without being seen," Ayanna whispered. They used back alleys and empty lots, moving from shadow to shadow. The bank was on the main plaza, a solid adobe building that had survived 50 years of frontier violence. They slipped in through the back door, startling a clerk who nearly dropped his ledger. "Mr. Cole, I didn't expect to see you here. Is my debt paid? Did Samuel Briggs bring the money?" The clerk's expression went strange. "Mr. Briggs came this morning, yes, but he didn't have $700. Only $300. The floor seemed to drop out from under Ethan's feet. "What? He said that was all you could raise. Said you'd hoped it would be enough for a partial payment, but—" The clerk shrugged apologetically. "The bank wouldn't accept it. Full payment or nothing, those were the orders." "Orders from who?" "From Mr. Harlow. He bought your debt from the bank yesterday morning. Or rather, he initiated the purchase. The actual transfer won't be final until the land commissioner signs off on it. That usually takes a few days. So the debt's still technically with the bank. For now, but not for long. The paperwork's already at the land office. He owns your note now, and he's not interested in partial payments." The betrayal was complete. Sam had taken the money, kept more than half, and delivered just enough to make it look like he'd tried to help while ensuring the payment would fail. "Where's Samuel now?" "I don't know. He left right after. Looked sick about the whole thing, if you ask me. Because Sam was a decent man doing an indecent thing. Hating himself, but doing it anyway." Ethan turned to leave, but Ayanna grabbed his arm. "Wait. If Harlow owns your debt now, where's the original paperwork, the promissory note, the mortgage documents?" The clerk blinked. "Well, those would be at the land office, being transferred to Harlow's name as we speak." Ayanna looked at Ethan, and he saw the plan forming in her eyes. If those documents disappeared before the transfer was complete, the debt would be in limbo, Ethan finished. No legal owner, no one could foreclose. It was desperate, probably illegal, definitely dangerous. But what choice did they have? The land office was 3 buildings down from the bank, a small, poorly guarded building where territorial land records were kept. They waited until after dark until the last clerk left and locked the door. Then Ethan picked the lock with skills learned in his bounty hunting days, while Ayanna kept watch. Inside the records room was chaos, stacks of paper everywhere, filing systems that made no sense. It would take hours to find the right documents. They had maybe 20 minutes before someone noticed the broken lock. "You search the recent transactions," Ethan said. "I'll check the mortgage files." They tore through papers with controlled desperation. Every sound from outside made them freeze, hearts pounding. Ayanna found it first. "Here, transfer of debt. Vincent Harlow assuming ownership of the Ethan Cole promissory note, effective upon signature by the Territorial Land Commissioner." "Not signed yet. Still pending." She handed it to Ethan. He stared at the paper that represented everything: his land, his life, his future. Then he tore it in half. Quarters, eighths, kept tearing until it was confetti. "They'll have copies," Ayanna warned. "Let them. Without the original, they can't prove the transfer was legal. I'll tie it up in courts for years." They found 3 more related documents and destroyed them all. Then they slipped back out into the night, relocking the door behind them. As they collected their horses and prepared to leave Mesilla, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Samuel Briggs. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, like a man who hadn't slept in days. "Ethan, I need to talk to you." Ethan's hand went to his gun. "You've got nothing I want to hear. Please, just listen. I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice, Sam. Not when Harlow threatens your family." Samuel's voice cracked. "He said if I didn't help him, he'd hurt Clara, hurt my daughters. He showed me a letter, detailed plans of what his men would do to them." The words hung in the air. Ethan wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to the betrayal like a shield, but he'd seen what desperate men did when family was threatened. Hell, he'd become a bounty hunter in the first place to earn money for Nayeli's medical care before they were married. Desperation made monsters of good men. "Where's the rest of my money?" Ethan asked. Samuel reached into his coat, pulled out 2 leather pouches. "The 300 I took to the bank. They wouldn't accept it, so I kept it. And the 450 I was supposed to keep for myself. All of it. $750, everything you gave me." He held them out, hands shaking. "I couldn't go through with it, Ethan. I couldn't keep blood money even to save my own skin. I lied to Harlow, told him I'd delivered only what you had, kept the rest to give back to you." Ethan took both pouches, weighing them in his hands. The full weight of what Samuel was returning, all of it. "Why?" "Because I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't look my wife in the eye." Samuel's voice was broken. "I'm not a brave man, Ethan, but I'm trying not to be a completely worthless one." Ayanna spoke up. "Harlow will come after your family anyway. You know that right men like him don't let betrayal slide." Samuel nodded miserably. "I know. That's why Clara and the girls are already on their way to her sister's place in El Paso. I'm heading there next, going to disappear for a while." He looked at Ethan one last time. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I tried to make it right. That counts for something, doesn't it?" Ethan thought about Red Bear, about the innocent man he'd killed for money, about all the ways a person could do the wrong thing and spend the rest of their life trying to balance the scales. "Yeah, Sam, it counts." Relief washed over Samuel's face. "Thank you. And Ethan, be careful. Harlow's not done. He's already talking to the territorial governor, getting warrants drawn up. He wants you arrested for theft, destruction of property, conspiracy. He's making this personal." "It's been personal from the start." Samuel nodded and walked away into the darkness, a broken man trying to salvage something from the wreckage of his choices. Ethan and Ayanna mounted their horses. "Where now?" she asked. Ethan thought for a moment. "We finish this. We take the fight to Harlow, publicly, permanently. How we find a newspaper willing to print the truth. We expose everything. The grave desecration plans, the corruption, the bribes, all of it. You think anyone will care? They will if we make enough noise. They rode through the night heading for the office of the Mesilla Valley Independent, a small newspaper run by a man Ethan had met once years ago, Thomas Garrett, a printer with a reputation for not backing down from powerful interests. If anyone would help them, it would be Garrett. The question was whether help would be enough, or whether they were already too late. Thomas Garrett's printing office occupied a narrow building sandwiched between a feed store and a barber shop. Even at midnight light showed through the windows. The clatter of the printing press echoed into the street. Ethan knocked. The press noise stopped. Footsteps approached. A voice called through the door. "We're closed. Come back tomorrow. Mr. Garrett, my name is Ethan Cole. I have a story you'll want to hear." The door opened a crack. A man in his 40s peered out in ink-stained hands, wire-rimmed spectacles, suspicious eyes. "Ethan Cole, the rancher Harlow's trying to destroy." "That's me." "And you have a story." Skepticism dripped from every word. "I have proof, documents, names, a conspiracy that goes all the way to the territorial governor's office." Garrett studied him for several seconds, then opened the door wide. "Come in, both of you, and this better be worth my time." Inside the office was controlled chaos, stacks of paper everywhere. The press dominating the center of the room, the sharp smell of ink and metal. They spent 2 hours going through everything. Ethan talked. Ayanna corroborated. They laid out the whole story start to finish, leaving out only the parts about the graves they'd moved. Some secrets needed to stay secret. When they finished, Garrett sat back in his chair processing. "This is big, bigger than I thought. If even half of what you're telling me is true, this could bring down Harlow, the governor, maybe the entire Territorial Land Commission." "Will you print it?" Garrett laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Print it, son. If I print this, I'll have a target on my back for the rest of my life." "Then you won't help us." "I didn't say that." Garrett stood, moved to the press, ran his hand over it, like a man touching something sacred. "I became a newspaper man because I believe people have a right to know the truth, even when the truth is ugly, even when it's dangerous." He turned back to them. "I'll print it, front page, tomorrow's edition. But you need to understand something. Once this is out there, there's no taking it back. Harlow will come after you with everything he has. So will the governor. They'll use the law, they'll use violence, they'll use whatever works. I know. And you're willing to risk it anyway." Ethan glanced at Ayanna. She nodded slightly. "Yes." Garrett smiled, and this time it was real. "Then let's burn some bridges." They worked through the night, Garrett writing and rewriting, getting the story just right. Ethan and Ayanna helping set type, learning the mechanics of the press. By dawn, the first edition was ready. The headline screamed in bold type, "Corruption, Exposed Territorial Governor. Implicated in Land Scheme." Below it a detailed article laying out everything. Harlow's plans, the bribes, the forged mining permits, the conspiracy to defraud ranchers and desecrate Apache sacred sites. Names named. Evidence cited. No punches pulled. Garrett ran 500 copies, then sent his assistant out to distribute them while it was still early, before anyone could stop him. "Now we wait," Garrett said. "See who blinks first." They didn't have to wait long. By noon the town was buzzing. People gathered in groups reading the newspaper, talking in urgent voices, some angry, some scared, all of them engaged. By 2 in the afternoon, federal marshals arrived from Santa Fe, not to arrest Ethan, but to investigate the allegations. The scandal was too big, too public to ignore. By evening, the territorial governor had resigned in disgrace. A week after the newspaper broke the story, Ethan received a letter from the Territorial Bank. The new management, appointed by federal oversight, had reviewed his case. Given the circumstances, the fraudulent manipulation of his debt by Harlow, and the public service he'd done in exposing the corruption, they were offering a settlement. His original debt of $650 would be restructured, extended to 5 years at reasonable interest. First payment not due for 6 months, giving him time to rebuild. It wasn't forgiveness. He'd still have to pay every dollar, but it was mercy and time. Ethan signed the papers with hands that shook slightly, not from fear, but from the weight lifting off his shoulders. The ranch was truly his, not free and clear, but his to keep, his to build, his to pass on. And Vincent Harlow had disappeared, gone, vanished into the wind like smoke. Some said he fled to Mexico. Others claimed he'd gone east back to whatever hole he'd crawled out of. A few whispered that the Apache had caught him somewhere in the desert and justice had been served in ways newspapers couldn't print. Ethan didn't know which version was true, didn't particularly care. What mattered was that the threat was gone. His land was safe. The Territorial Bank, now under federal oversight, had voided Harlow's purchase of the debt. Ethan's original mortgage was reinstated with reasonable terms and extended deadlines. He had time, space, a chance to rebuild. But there was still one piece of business left unfinished. A week after the newspaper broke the story, Ethan and Ayanna rode north to the hidden canyon, where they'd reburied the remains from the place of sorrows. They brought the gold, all of it, the $750 they'd taken from the graves. Karuk was waiting there, not by chance. Ayanna had sent word through Apache channels asking for this meeting. The war chief looked at the leather pouch Ethan held. "You're returning what you stole." "Yes." "Why, your debt is settled. You could keep it." Ethan looked at the grave marked with stones and ceremony. "Because it was never mine. Because some debts can't be measured in dollars. Because I've taken enough from your people, and it's time to start giving back." He placed the pouch on the grave. Ayanna added tobacco and cornmeal, speaking prayers in Apache. Karuk watched in silence. Then, "My chief asked me to deliver a message. He says you may stay on your land, that he will not oppose you, that perhaps one white man who keeps his promises is better than 100 who don't. Tell him I'm honored. He also says that if you marry his daughter, he expects grandchildren who know their Apache heritage as well as their white heritage." Both Ethan and Ayanna startled at that. "We're not married?" Ethan said quickly. "Not yet," Karuk replied, "but my chief is patient. He can wait." The war chief smiled slightly, then turned serious again. "The land Harlow wanted to desecrate, the sacred sites, they're safe. For now, the federal government has placed them under protection while they investigate. Long-term, I don't know, but at least it buys time. Time is all we ever have. We make of it what we can." Karuk mounted his horse. "My chief also says this. You're welcome at our fires, both of you, as friends if you choose, as family if that day comes." He rode away, leaving Ethan and Ayanna alone with the dead and the future. They stood in silence for a long time. Finally, Ayanna spoke. "What now? Now we go back, start rebuilding, see if we can actually make a life worth living. Together." Ethan turned to face her fully. "I'd like that, if you would. Not as your wife, not yet, maybe not ever. That's not something I'm ready for. Then as what? As your partner, equal in all things. My name on the deed next to yours, my voice in every decision, building something together that belongs to both of us." Ethan thought about it, about tradition and expectations and the way things were supposed to be done. Then he thought about everything they'd been through, the graves they'd moved, the enemies they'd faced, the choices they'd made. Traditional didn't matter anymore. Partners, he agreed. They shook hands. The deal struck. Then Ayanna stepped closer, rising on her toes, and kissed him. Not passionate or desperate, just certain, a promise of what might come if they both chose it. When they broke apart, Ethan smiled. "Was that part of the partnership agreement?" "No, that was just me choosing what I want." "And what do you want?" "I want to see if a man who killed my brother can become someone my brother would have respected. I want to see if I can build a life that honors the dead while celebrating the living. I want to try. That's all any of us can do." They rode back to the ranch together as the sun set over New Mexico territory, painting the sky in colors that promised tomorrow. The ranch was damaged, but standing. They'd have work to do, fences to mend, cabin to repair, cattle to buy, with what little money remained. But they'd have time to do it, together. 6 months passed. The ranch slowly came back to life. New cattle purchased with a loan from the newly reformed Territorial Bank. Fences rebuilt. The cabin expanded to have 2 rooms now, giving them both space. Ayanna planted a garden using seeds and techniques her grandmother had taught her. Apache crops grown in partnership with the land rather than taken from it. Ethan worked the cattle, learning to be the rancher he'd always claimed to be. Neighbors helped. Samuel Briggs returned from El Paso, his family safe, ready to make amends. Other ranchers who'd been saved from Harlow's schemes offered labor equipment friendship. A community formed, not perfect, not without tensions and difficulties, but real. Dakota came once unannounced with Karuk and 6 warriors. Not a war party, a visiting party. He inspected the ranch, spoke with Ethan about water rights and grazing boundaries, made practical arrangements for Apache families to continue using certain parts of the land for traditional purposes. Before he left, he pulled Ayanna aside. They spoke in Apache for a long time. When they finished, Ayanna was crying, and her father's stone face had softened into something almost like approval. "What did he say?" Ethan asked after they'd gone. "He said I chose well, that he's proud of me, that Red Bear would be proud too." "You think that's true?" "I don't know, but I choose to believe it." The territorial government under new leadership after the scandal offered Ethan a position: scout for new settlement boundaries, liaison between ranchers and Apache, someone who understood both worlds and could bridge them. He declined. "I'm done being between things," he told the official who came calling. "I'm just trying to be one thing, a good man. That's enough work for one lifetime." On a cool evening in early spring, Ethan and Ayanna sat on the porch of the expanded cabin, watching the last light fade from the Oregon mountains. "You asked me something months ago," Ayanna said, "about whether I'd stay, build this with you." "I remember. I have an answer now." Ethan waited, heart suddenly beating faster. "I'll stay, but on one condition." "What condition?" "You let me buy in, become a real partner, my money, my labor, my name on the deed. Not as your wife, not as your helper, as your equal." Ethan pulled a folded paper from his pocket, held it out. She unfolded it, a new deed, filed with the Territorial Land Office, reading Ethan Cole and Ayanna Dakota joint owners and equal partners in the property described below. Her eyes widened. "When did you do this?" "Last week. Figured if we were building something together, it should actually be together." She stared at the paper for a long moment, then looked at him, and her eyes were bright with tears she didn't let fall. "You're still the man who killed my brother. I know. But you're also the man who's trying every day to be better than that, and maybe that's enough." She moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. His arm came around her, careful, gentle, asking permission with every movement. "It's not forgiveness," she said quietly. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive what you did. I don't expect you to. But maybe it's something else, something better, a choice to move forward instead of staying trapped in the past." They sat like that as full darkness fell and stars emerged, one by one, across the vast New Mexico sky. The land stretched around them, hard land, unforgiving land, but theirs. Earned not through violence or theft, but through choice and sacrifice and the slow, painful work of becoming better than they'd been. In the distance, a coyote called. Another answered. The eternal conversation of the desert night. Ethan thought about Red Bear, about Naili, about all the ghosts that walked with him, would always walk with him, demanding he be worthy of their memory. He thought about the graves they'd moved, the ceremonies they'd performed, the promises they'd made to the dead and the living. He thought about tomorrow, about the work still to be done, about the partnership they were building from broken pieces and desperate choices and stubborn hope. "What are you thinking?" Ayanna asked. "That I don't deserve this. Any of it." "Good. The moment you think you deserve it is the moment you stop working for it." She was right, as she so often was. The future was uncertain, the land was hard, the past was unforgiving. But they had each other. They had purpose. They had a chance. And sometimes, in this harsh territory, where men killed for gold and died for water, that was all anyone could ask. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. The wind whispered through the scrub. The land kept its eternal silence. And on a small ranch in the shadow of mountains, two people sat together, not forgetting the past, but choosing, despite it, to build something new. Not perfect, not easy, but earned. And that made all the difference, the end.